Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you there's one prayer, just one, that does more than bring answers? A prayer that doesn't just touch heaven, but swings wide its gates. This is not superstition. It's not formula. It's a divine secret, wrapped in simplicity. Some pray for healing. Others cry out for provision. But there's a deeper cry, a pure longing. And the moment this one prayer is whispered, not shouted, not performed, but whispered in truth, heaven cannot stay silent. So before you scroll away or think you've heard it all, ask yourself, the breakthrough I've been waiting for hangs on a single sentence. Say with me, because this isn't a message, it's a lifeline. There are many kinds of prayers. Prayers of intercession, thanksgiving, praise, even desperation. But none carry the fragrance like the prayer of surrender. This is the one prayer that does not begin with give me, but with take me. It says, not my will, but yours be done. Why does heaven respond to this so powerfully? Because this prayer reflects the very nature of heaven itself. Yieldedness, unity, trust. It's the language of angels and the breath of saints. This prayer unlocks peace when circumstances rage. It brings clarity when confusion chokes. It silences fear, not because the danger disappears, but because God steps into the room. Surrender is not weakness. It's the fiercest act of faith. To lay down your control, your plans, your timing, and say, have your way, Lord. It is not a resignation, it's an invitation, not to loss, but to divine partnership. Imagine a locked door with 1,000 keys lying scattered around. Some try the key of performance, others the key of persistence. But nothing turns the lock until someone finally bends low, lifts a key called surrender, and places it gently into the lock. The door swings open. Why? Because heaven only opens to hearts that let go. There's a mystery in the spiritual realm that many overlook. We often associate powerful prayer with eloquence, length, or emotional intensity. We imagine that the more words we pour out, the more heaven will pay attention. But in reality, it is not the volume, not the sophistication, not even the desperation that opens heaven's door. It is simplicity. The most powerful prayer is not always the loudest one in the room. It may not be the most poetic or the most well-structured. It may not even feel powerful when it is first spoken. But its strength doesn't come from the lips that utter it. It comes from the posture of the heart behind it. And when the heart kneels low in sincerity, in absolute surrender, heaven listens. All of heaven leans in. We see this in the lives of those who carried the greatest spiritual authority, not because they were the most educated, the most articulate, or the most perfect, but because they had mastered the art of saying less and meaning more. They were not striving to impress God, they were yielding to Him. And in their quiet submission, something glorious happened. Power flowed, presence came, doors opened. Why? Because simplicity strips the soul of pride. It removes the need to perform. It leaves no space for pretense. Simplicity in prayer is the soul's way of saying, I have nothing to offer you but myself. And that is the offering that stirs the heart of God. Not the polished words, not the carefully constructed phrases, but the simple cry that says, Here I am, Lord. Not hiding, not negotiating, in the veil of hope. That's why the one prayer that opens heaven's door is so disarmingly simple. It's not a grand declaration. It's not rooted in theology or religious formality. It doesn't require training, experience, or status. A child can pray it. A dying man can whisper it. A broken woman can groan it through her tears. It is the prayer of the surrendered soul. It is the moment we say, from the deepest place in us, not my will, but yours. And that's all it takes. See, we often get caught in the idea that our words need to move God, as if as distant or distracted, but God isn't moved by theatrics. He is moved by truth. And truth doesn't need dressing up. The simplest words, spoken in authenticity, carry more spiritual weight than entire paragraphs full of empty noise. Yes, Lord, have your way. I trust you. These are not placeholders. They are keys. They are doors themselves. The power of simplicity is that it doesn't try to control the outcome. It doesn't say, I surrender if you fix this. It says, I surrender no matter what. There's no transaction, no manipulation, just surrender. And that is the atmosphere heaven responds to, because it is the only one where God is truly welcome to be God. The truth is, simplicity terrifies our flesh because it asks us to stop hiding behind complexity. It removes our excuses. We can no longer say, I don't know how to pray, because simplicity says, just be real. We can no longer say, I'm not spiritual enough, because simplicity doesn't require a resume. It only asks for a willing heart. So many people miss the breakthrough because they're looking for the right words. They believe the door to heaven is guarded by language, that you must say everything perfectly for it to open. But heaven's door doesn't respond to perfect words. It responds to an honest heart. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, gave us the most powerful example of this, facing unimaginable sorrow. He did not perform a grand prayer. He simply said, Father, not my will, but yours. And that moment, with those few words, eternity shifted, because the weight of surrender, carried in that short sentence, changed everything. This is why the prayer that opens heaven is simple, because real surrender doesn't need an explanation. Real trust doesn't need decoration. The power is not in how long you speak, but in how deeply you mean it. And isn't that freeing? That you don't have to earn God's attention or perfect your phrasing to get a response. All you have to do is come honestly. All you have to do is speak from your heart. God is not interested in how spiritual you sound. He is listening for one thing, truth. And truth doesn't ramble, truth doesn't perform. Truth just says, here I am, Lord. Do what only you can do. So if you've been weary, tired from trying to pray the right way, worn out from begging for a breakthrough, just stop. Take a breath. Let the noise fall away. And simply say, I surrender. It may not feel dramatic. It may not shake the room, but it will shake the gates of heaven. And the one who sees in secret will open what no man can shut. Because the simplest prayer, spoken with the greatest sincerity, still moves the heart of God. It always will. There is a longing in every human heart, a longing to touch something beyond the visible, to connect with something eternal. We all come to moments in life when human help is not enough, when the comfort of people fails, when logic has no answer, and we find ourselves crying out into the silence, hoping someone hears us. The cry might sound different for each of us, whispers in the dark, shouts of desperation, or even silent tears that never form words. But they all rise from the same place, a desire for divine access, a yearning to connect with heaven. But here is the question that haunts so many. Does heaven respond to me? Can I really access the presence and power of God? Too many live believing that the answer is no, that God is far off, unreachable, locked behind some sacred barrier only a chosen few can pass through. Some think access to God is reserved for the ultra-spiritual, the prayer warriors, the saints of old. Others believe they've made too many mistakes to even hope for such nearness. Shame, fear, and guilt become the bars of a prison they were never meant to live in. But the truth, oh, the liberating truth, is that divine access has never been about worthiness, performance, or status. It has always been about surrender. And there is one prayer, not one full of religious jargon or theological complexity, but one prayer of the heart that opens that door. And that prayer doesn't shout, God, give me. It says, God, I give you all. When you stop trying to earn your way in and start surrendering your heart, heaven moves. When a soul comes humbly, not with an agenda, but with open hands, not demanding, but yielding, something shifts in the unseen realm. God does not resist weakness. He meets it. He does not turn from the sinner. He runs to the surrendered. And the moment a heart yields, even slightly, the door of heaven begins to creak open. Divine access is not achieved. It's received. It's a gift, not a trophy. You don't climb a ladder to heaven. You fall to your knees and find that heaven comes down to meet you. Many seek formulas. They ask, what must I say to get God to respond? But heaven has never responded to formulas. It responds to faith. Faith enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to fix this, but I trust you. That simple faith, the kind that lets go instead of trying harder, is the golden key. It's what opens the curtain and brings you from the outer courts into the Holy of Holies, not because you are holy, but because you are honest. The most miraculous encounters with God don't usually happen in crowded arenas or loud moments. They happen in quiet places where someone whispered, God, I can't do this anymore. I need you. That is the prayer that parts the heavens. That is the cry that pierces the noise of earth and reaches the throne of God. Because it isn't polished, it isn't proud, it is pure. God is not impressed by long prayers. He is drawn to real ones. When you lay down the performance and simply say, I surrender, you are not being weak. You are opening a door that no earthly power could ever unlock. Divine access is not about the strength of your grip. It's about the depth of your release. We were never meant to live at a distance from God. We were not created to shout toward heaven hoping our voices might reach. We were created for communion, for intimacy, for access. But the path to that access is not paved with achievement. It's paved with surrender. The most powerful people in God's kingdom are not the loudest, the most visible, or even the most educated. They are the ones who have learned the secret of yielding. They are the ones who have laid down their crowns, their plans, their pride, and said, your will, not mine. And that's when heaven responds. Not because you finally proved yourself, but because you finally let him be God. Divine access is the result of divine exchange. Your will for his, your plans for his presence, your fear for his peace. That is the prayer that opens the door. If you're still knocking and nothing seems to open, ask yourself, have I truly surrendered, or am I still trying to earn my way in? Have I really let go? Or am I still holding on to what I think should happen? The moment you let go, truly let go, something beautiful begins. The atmosphere shifts. The weight lifts. Not always because circumstances change immediately, but because you've stepped into a place where you are no longer alone. You have entered the throne room. Divine access is not some far-off fantasy. It is a breath away. It is the birthright of the surrendered. And the prayer that brings you there is the simplest one you'll ever pray. Not long, not loud, but true. My will, but yours be done. That's the door opener. That's the game changer. That's the prayer that brings heaven down. And heaven always answers surrender. Always. There is a place in prayer that religion cannot take you. There is a depth that ritual alone cannot reach. There is a sound, a cry of the soul that is deeper than tradition, older than doctrines, and more powerful than man-made rules. It is the sound of a heart longing for God, not because it was told to. Religion has its forms. It teaches us how to kneel, what words to say, when to say them, and how to behave in the presence of God. But form without fire is empty. A body can kneel while the heart stands in pride. Lips can move while the spirit remains untouched. Religion can dress the outside, but cannot awaken the inner man. It can tell you where the door is, but it cannot open it for you. But there is a prayer that steps beyond all that. One prayer that breaks through the layers of routine, ritual, and religious noise. It is not confined to cathedrals or bound by denominational lines. It doesn't require a title, a pulpit, or a collar. It rises from the simplest soul and travels straight into the throne room. It is the prayer of surrender, the cry that says, I don't want just another service, I want you. This is the prayer that opens heaven, not because it's technically perfect, but because it's spiritually honest. This kind of prayer doesn't wait for the right setting or the right song. It doesn't need a choir, a robe, or a script. You could pray it in a crowded room or in the stillness of your bedroom. You could pray it in a hospital bed, in a prison cell, or walking down a busy street. Because this prayer is not about location, it's about posture. You see, God never asked for performance. He asked for truth. And truth cannot be taught by religion. It must be awakened by relationship. This is why some people can spend years in church and still never truly encounter God. They've heard about him. They've learned his stories. They've sung the songs. But they've never surrendered. They've never stepped past religion into intimacy. And yet, a prostitute in tears who whispers, "Forgive me," can find herself at the feet of a holy God. A criminal hanging on a cross can say, "Remember me," and be welcomed into paradise. Why? Because God doesn't see the outer man. He sees the heart. He listens not for polish, but for purity, not for tradition, but for truth. Religion draws lines, who's in and who's out, who's qualified and who's not. But heaven does not operate on our divisions. God is not Baptist or Pentecostal or Catholic or evangelical. He is not impressed by labels. He is moved by longing. He is not attracted to performance. Though, when a soul comes to him, not with credentials, not with spiritual resumes, but just with a trembling heart and a prayer of surrender, he does not wait. He does not weigh their past. He receives them. That's what makes the one true prayer so powerful. It bypasses the religious system entirely. It's not trying to climb some ladder of holiness. It's admitting, I can't climb. I need you to lift me. And that is the moment heaven responds. People have made prayer complicated, tangled it in theological arguments, burdened it with expectations, but it was never meant to be that way. Prayer was never supposed to be a performance. It was always meant to be a profounce, a meeting place, a holy collision between a broken soul and a perfect God. And all it takes to enter is surrender. The one prayer that opens heaven's door does not require spiritual perfection. It doesn't demand a history of righteousness. All it asks is that you mean it with your whole heart, with nothing held back, with no religious filter, just real, raw, and reverent. When you step beyond religion, you find relationship. You begin to realize that God is not a distant judge waiting for you to get it all right. He is a loving Father longing for your nearness. He is not waiting for a performance. He is waiting for permission. And the moment you say, not my will, but yours, you give him that permission. You allow him to move, to change, to heal, to fill, to transform. This prayer is the death of pride and the birth of intimacy. It is where religion ends and relationship begins. And it doesn't matter how far you've wandered, how long you've been gone, or how broken you feel. This one prayer can bring you home. So tear down the walls, lay aside the script, step out of the shadows of religion and into the light of truth. You don't need more rules. You need more of him. And he is one prayer away. The one prayer that opens heaven's door is not religious. It's real, it's not practiced, it's personal, and it's not bound by man's traditions. It's released by a surrendered heart. When you pray it, you're not just speaking into the air. You're entering the presence of the living God. And once you've been there, truly been there, nothing else will ever satisfy again. We live in a world that celebrates strategy. From corporate boardrooms to pulpits, we are taught to plan, to analyze, to design our way towards success. We are told that the right method, the right system, the right formula will unlock every door. Strategy is everywhere, whether it's in building careers, managing families, or even seeking answers from God. We are trained to solve everything with action, step up. There is a place the best strategy cannot take you. There is a moment when plans fall short, when intellect fails, and when even the most disciplined routine breaks under the weight of real life. That is where surrender begins. To render is not weakness, it is not passivity, it is not giving up, it is giving over. It is not saying I quit, it is saying I trust. There is a massive difference between trying to control an outcome and placing it entirely in the hands of the one who already sees the end from the beginning. And that is where so many miss the door to heaven, not because they don't want God, but because they still want to hold the steering wheel. You can't strategize your way into a miracle. You can't manage your way into an outpouring. There are moments in your walk with God when he will wait, not for your next move, but for your surrender. Not for another idea, but for your yielded heart. That's when the real shift happens. That's when heaven opens. The one prayer that opens heaven's door is not a prayer of planning. It is not a list of demands or expectations. It is not, God, here is what I need you to do and how I want you to do it. It is the opposite. It is the quiet, trembling whisper of the soul that says, I don't know what to do, but I trust you. And that prayer, though small in words, is thunder in the spirit. It silences the strategies of man and welcomes the sovereignty of God. We often come to God with our blueprints. We say, here's my life, Lord, now bless it. Here's my 5-year plan, now breathe on it. But God is not obligated to breathe on anything he didn't author. He's not impressed by our schedules. He is moved by our surrender. It is only when we lay down the blueprint that he gives us the vision. It is only when we lay down the method that he reveals the miracle. The early disciples didn't change the world through strategic models or polished presentations. They turned the world upside down because they were utterly surrendered. They had no fallback plan, no backup system, no political power. What they had was the Holy Spirit and hearts that had said, whatever you want, we will do it. That is what brings heaven to earth. That is what releases glory. Surrender, not strategy. Now that doesn't mean God is against structure or wisdom. He is a God of order. But when strategy becomes our source, we edge him out. When we start depending more on plans than on prayer, we miss the point. Heaven doesn't respond to formulas. It responds to faith. And faith is revealed in surrender. When we put everything on the altar and say, even if you don't move the way I hope, I'll still trust you. That is not easy. It is not natural. We want control. We crave certainty. We want answers in advance. But surrender walks in the dark and still says God is good. Surrender doesn't need proof before it obeys. Surrender doesn't argue, negotiate, or delay. It simply says yes. Think of Jesus in the garden. He knew what was coming. He knew the pain, the betrayal, the cross. And he prayed not for escape, but for alignment. Not my will, but yours be done. In that one sentence, heaven's plan moved forward. Not because it was strategic, but because it was surrendered. We are often waiting on God to act, while he is waiting on us to yield. We cry out, Lord, open the door, and he says, lay down your key. The door is not opened by pushing harder. It opens when you stop pushing entirely. The posture that opens heaven is not one of striving, but of stillness. Some of you have been fighting, planning, laboring in your own strength, praying with a clenched jaw and a clenched fist. But what if heaven is not waiting on your intensity, but your release? What if the very breakthrough you've been fasting and pleading for is on the other side of a whisper that says, I surrender? Surrender is the end of self-sufficiency. It is the death of pride. But it is also the beginning of supernatural peace, provision, and power. It's not glamorous. It won't always look impressive on the outside. But it is the secret place where heaven touches earth. So lay down your strategies, lay down your timelines, lay down your need to control. Open your hands, open your heart, and say the one prayer that moves the throne of God. Have your way, Lord. Because when you truly surrender, you don't just get answers, you get him. And he is always more than enough. There is something sacred about an honest cry. It cuts through layers of pretense, shatters the armor of pride, and echoes in places too deep for words. When all the right phrases run dry, when the memorized prayers fail to comfort, and when silence presses in like a weight too heavy to bear, an honest cry rises, not from the lips, but from the soul. And that cry, fragile as it may seem, is powerful enough to shake heaven. We are often taught to be composed, to maintain control, to come to God with faith that sounds polished and confident. But heaven is not drawn to perfection. Heaven is drawn to truth, not the truth we perform for others, but the truth we live with when the doors are shut, the lights are off, and our heart is laid bare before God. That is where the honest cry lives, and that is where heaven listens closest. The one prayer that opens heaven's door is not always neat or beautiful by human standards. It is often messy. It may be soaked in tears, whispered through clenched teeth, or gasped between sobs. It may not even be spoken at all. Sometimes it is a groan too deep for words, a longing too profound to articulate. But it is real, and that is what matters most to God. There is a story behind every honest cry. It may be the cry of someone who has tried everything and is finally letting go. The cry of the weary mother who can't do one more day alone. The cry of the young man who has failed too many times to believe there's still grace for him. The cry of someone who has buried a loved one and doesn't know how to keep breathing. The cry of someone who has wandered far and isn't even sure if God would still receive them. These are not rehearsed prayers. These are raw, unrehearsed moments of surrender. And heaven moves at the sound of them. God is not moved by performance. He is moved by pain when it is offered in truth. There's something about brokenness that God cannot resist, not because he enjoys our suffering, but because he longs to fill what we finally admit is empty. When we stop pretending and let our soul cry out just as it is, without masks, without religious vocabulary, without self-protection, that is when the atmosphere shifts. That is when the veil thins. That is when the King draws near. The honest cry does not need to be long. It doesn't need to be well constructed. It doesn't need to follow a pattern. It just needs to be real. Lord, I need you. I can't do this anymore. Help me. Forgive me. I'm afraid. These simple phrases, when spoken from the depths, hold more power than 1,000 rehearsed lines. Because what God wants is not your performance. He wants your heart. All of it. Implicitly. Even the scared, confused, broken parts. Some think that approaching God requires spiritual strength, that they must be ready before they pray. But the gospel flips that idea on its head. You come not when you're ready. You come because you're not. You come in the middle of the mess. You come while you're still bleeding. And that cry, that reaching, is not a sign of weakness. It is the sound of your spirit, remembering its source. It is the soul waking up. There's a reason Scripture says he is close to the brokenhearted, because it is in brokenness that we let him in. When everything else is stripped away, status, title, plans, reputation, and all we have left is that honest cry, that is when heaven's door swings wide open. The proud pray to be heard, but the broken pray to be held. And God answers that cry not with silence. You don't have to know how to say it. You just have to mean it. Some of the most powerful moments of prayer don't happen at the altar. They happen in cars, in bedrooms, in hospital rooms, in places where no one is watching but God. And those moments matter. They matter more than the applause of a crowd. They matter more than your perfect track record. Because God is not counting your performance. He's listening for your honesty. Heaven is not far from the one who cries out in truth. In fact, the cry of the honest heart is the shortest path between earth and heaven. When you open your mouth in surrender, you are not praying into a void. You are touching eternity. You are inviting the eternal God to step into your moment, your pain, your story. So do not underestimate the power of your cry. Don't believe the lie that you must first be strong to be heard. Don't wait until you've cleaned yourself up to call on him. Cry out now, just as you are, even if your voice shakes, even if all you can do is weep. That is enough. That is more than enough. The one prayer that opens heaven's door is not a masterpiece. It's a lifeline. It's the moment you stop performing and start reaching. It's the moment you say, God, this is all I have. And he responds, it's all I've been waiting for. Heaven is not closed to the honest cry. Heaven is drawn to it. Heaven is moved by it. Heaven opens because of it. There is a language heaven understands that goes far beyond eloquence. A tone that isn't heard with human ears but felt with divine attention. Heaven doesn't respond to how polished your words are or how perfect your delivery might be. Heaven responds to posture, the posture of your heart, your soul, your spirit. And when the posture is right, even the weakest whisper becomes a roar in the courts of heaven. We live in a culture obsessed with performance. From school to work, even in church settings, we're often trained to do more, be more, look better, sound stronger. We become so used to performing that it quietly seeps into our spiritual lives. We think if we can say the right words in prayer, keep the right posture, raise our hands at the right moment, and repeat the words that sound anointed, we will move God. But God cannot be manipulated by performance. He does not respond to rehearsed prayers. He is not moved by outer appearances. He is moved by inner surrender. You see, the one prayer that opens heaven's door isn't a perfect speech. It's a heart bowed low in reverence and truth. You can have all the right words and still not touch heaven if your heart is proud. And yet you can fumble through broken phrases, even just groan through pain, and all of heaven will stand at attention if the heart is bowed in humility. God is drawn to posture, not the kind where your back is straight and your voice is loud, but the kind where your spirit is bent low in surrender. That posture, the inward one, is where the divine meets the human. That's where heaven responds. Think about the tax collector in the temple. He stood at a distance, wouldn't even lift his head. He beat his chest and said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." That was it. No poetry, no formula, no polished prayer. And Jesus said that man, not the one who boasted of his righteousness, went home justified. Why? Because of posture. Because the man came to God with nothing but truth and humility. And that is all God needs to move. The posture of surrender says, I know I don't deserve anything, but I trust in your mercy. And the posture of worship says, I'm not here to get something. I'm here to give you everything. The posture of desperation says, I don't care how it looks anymore. I need you. That kind of posture breaks walls. That kind of posture parts the heavens. That kind of posture gets heaven's attention. There's a difference between praying to be heard and praying to be held. When your posture is one of performance, you pray for effect, for what others will think or how spiritual you will sound. But when your posture is true, raw, and surrendered, you don't pray for effect, you pray for encounter. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're reaching for God, and He knows the difference. Some of the most powerful prayers ever prayed were not shouted from stages. They were whispered in desperation, prayed from hospital rooms, jail cells, battlefields, dark bedrooms, or tear-stained pillows, because it is not the volume of your voice, but the position of your heart that moves heaven. You can pray in silence, with a trembling hand and a shattered spirit, and the presence of God will rush in like a flood, not because you performed, but because you postured yourself in surrender. The problem is, we're often too busy trying to look strong. We want to come to God full of plans, full of pride, full of self. But God is not looking for full vessels. He is looking for empty ones, vessels that know they have nothing to offer apart from Him. Vessels that say, without you, I can't breathe. That posture, utter dependence, that is what draws the power of heaven. You don't need a pulpit to pray the one prayer that opens heaven's door. You don't need a crowd or a mic or even the right words. All you need is the right posture. A posture that says, Lord, I'm yours, all of me. I hold nothing back. A posture that bows even when life doesn't make sense. A posture that worships in the fire, trusts in the dark, and kneels even when the world says stand tall. It is this kind of posture that pleases God. It is this kind of posture that turns a moment into a miracle. This is how the heavens open. Not with noise, not with flair, but with a yielded heart that says, yes. And once you've tasted what it means to truly surrender, you realize you don't need to perform to be loved. You don't need to impress to be accepted. God was never looking for performance. He was looking for presence. So come just as you are. Lay down the mask. Put aside the script. Bow your heart low, even if your voice is weak, because that posture is where heaven breaks through. The King of Glory is not moved by how great you sound, but how real you are. He is not seeking actors, he is seeking worshipers, in spirit and in truth. And when he finds one, even just one with that posture, he responds. Every time. There is a moment in every true spiritual journey where the heart begins to sense that heaven is not as far away as it once seemed. A stirring awakens, and the soul begins to recognize that there is an order, a divine rhythm to everything. God does. Heaven is not random. It is not silent. It is always active, always moving, always ready to respond. But it responds to alignment, not demand. When earth aligns with heaven, the door opens. Utterly reliant is not about perfection, it's about position. It is about tuning the heart to heaven's frequency. Just like a radio must be set to the right station to receive the broadcast, the soul must be tuned to God's wavelength to receive his presence and power. Too often we try to drag heaven down to our chaos, asking God to bless what he never initiated, to breathe on plans that were never birthed in prayer. And God does not operate from our ground upward. He calls us to ascend to where he is. And when we do, things shift. The one prayer that opens heaven's door is not about persuading God to come down, but about positioning ourselves to rise up. Into his will, into his timing, into his order. When the heart aligns with the priorities of heaven, the door doesn't need to be forced open. It swings wide with authority. When our desires begin to match his desires, our prayers stop echoing and begin to resound. You see, heaven is not just a place. It's a government, a realm of divine authority. And alignment is about coming under that authority, not trying to wield it on our own terms. It's why Jesus taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. He didn't say, let our will be done in heaven. He said, let what is established in heaven be made manifest on earth. That is alignment. That is agreement. That is power. When the soul bows low and says, not my will, but yours, something incredible happens. Heaven doesn't just listen. It responds. Not because we said the right words, but because our heart found the right posture. And when heaven sees its reflection in your spirit, when God sees his character, his hunger, his purpose is burning in your heart, the separation between heaven and earth begins to thin. Alignment isn't passive. It's a choice. It means laying down your own agenda and saying, Lord, I only want what you want. If it's not from you, I don't need it. If you're not in it, I don't want it. That kind of surrender creates a vacuum that draws the presence of God. And where his presence is, heaven. In Scripture, moments of divine visitation didn't happen by accident. They came where there was alignment. Elijah didn't call down fire on Mount Carmel because he was dramatic. He did it because he was aligned. He rebuilt the altar. He prayed according to God's will. He didn't ask for fire to prove himself. He asked for fire so the people would know that God was still God, and heaven answered. The early church didn't see tons of fire fall because they were loud. They saw heaven open because they were in one accord. They aligned their hearts, their expectations, their worship, their focus. They waited, not on their own timing, but on the Lord's. And when the day of Pentecost had fully come, suddenly, heaven moved. So many people pray for open doors, but live misaligned. They ask for heaven's blessing while walking in earthly rebellion. But God does not bless confusion. He blesses obedience. He doesn't anoint fleshly ambition. He anoints yielded vessels. When we live in alignment with His Word, His Spirit, and His purposes, we become portals through which heaven touches earth. Even Jesus, the Son of God, walked in constant alignment. He said, I only do what I see my Father doing. He didn't improvise. He listened. He followed. He obeyed. That's alignment. And because of that posture, the heavens were always open over him. Miracles flowed. Power moved. Demons fled. Because he lived under open heaven. This same access is available not to the religious elite, not to the spiritually perfect, but to the surrendered. To those who say, Lord, bring my life into sync with your will. When you begin to long not for your own name to be lifted, but for His, not for your kingdom to be built, but for His, you will find yourself walking through doors you never had to push open. Alignment will always require sacrifice. It means letting go of timing, control, comfort. But the reward is beyond comprehension. When earth aligns with heaven, heaven doesn't trickle. It floods. The supernatural becomes natural. Peace replaces striving. Clarity replaces confusion, and the door to divine encounters, divine provision, divine assignments stands open. There is no formula to open heaven's door, but there is a posture, agreement. When your heart says yes to God's yes, when your spirit echoes heaven's voice, when your life becomes a reflection of His priorities, heaven will respond, not someday, not in theory, but in real, tangible, life-altering ways. So let the cry of your heart be more than a request. It must become a repositioning. Not God, come to me, but God, bring me into alignment with you. Because when that happens, when earth truly aligns with heaven, you won't need to knock down any doors. Heaven itself will open and the King will walk in. So I ask you now, not with pressure, but with purpose. Have you prayed the one prayer that opens heaven's door? Not the prayer that demands, not the one that bargains, came at the right time, but the one that whispers, Father, I am yours. Use me, change me, lead me. Even if the answer is not what I wanted, your will, not mine. If you're desperate for breakthrough, start there. If you're tired of striving, start there. If you want more than a blessing, if you want the blesser himself, start with surrender. That is the one prayer that opens heaven's door.